5, 6, 7, 8.
Welcome to the EX podcast, where I talk with business leaders, authors, and disruptors on how the workplace is changing. The podcast brings a different lens to the conversation around HR transformation, company culture, and employee engagement. It brings a brand and customer experience perspective rather than a traditional HR perspective. Why? Because companies have to think of themselves as employment brands if they hope to attract and retain talents. It is time we put people first to rehumanize the workplace, simply because leaders who don't care about their employees will eventually be surrounded by people who don't care about their business. Today's guest is Erica Keswin, best-selling author, workplace strategist, and the founder of the Spaghetti Project. Today with Erica, we cover a few very interesting topics from her best-selling book, Bring Your Human to Work, 10 surefire ways to design a workplace that is good for people, great for business, and just might change the world. We cover the following topics: encouraging employees to be healthy in body and spirit, running your meetings with clear purpose, making space for face-to-face interaction, building professional development into company culture, inspiring your workforce to give back to the community, and simply saying thank you. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Culture Amp. Eliminates the guesswork of company culture with Culture Amp, the world's largest independent employee feedback platform. Culture Amp goes beyond aggregating survey results to deliver rich insights and data-driven action plans on an easy-to-use interface. With a powerful platform, science-backed surveys, and a focus on its customer success, Culture Amp helps you increase employee engagement and build a positive company culture. Start developing a deep understanding of your employees' experience today by visiting cultureamp.com/ex. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Erica. And because it takes a good amount of time to produce this podcast, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube, as it will help promote the content. If you want me to speak at your next event, get some advice on your EX initiatives, or send me feedback and suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at @EX_summit. All right, let's get to it. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the EX podcast. Very excited for today's guest, Erica Keswin. Erica is calling from the New York City area, and she's a best-selling author, a workplace strategist, and the founder of the Spaghetti Project. I like the name, by the way. Erica, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
To start our conversation, tell us a bit more about who you are, what you do, and what the Spaghetti Project is about.
Sure. So I've spent about 20 plus years in the human capital space, which I describe as helping companies improve performance through people. So I've done recruiting, executive coaching, performance management, designing compensation programs, all of the pieces of the human side of business. And about 7 years ago, I got interested in looking at the impact of technology on corporate culture, how people connect at work, given how technology has become, such a huge part of our lives in every way. So when I was doing research for the book, I came across a study out of Cornell University by a professor named Kevin Niffen. And Kevin's father was a firefighter, so he grew up going to firehouses, and that was his world. And what Kevin found when he was getting his PhD in organizational psychology and studying what differentiates performance from one group to another was that the firefighters who were the most dedicated to the long-standing tradition of the firehouse meal, sitting around the table with their colleagues, building trust, those firefighters had higher performance and saved more lives. And so this was this aha moment for me and got me even more interested in looking at, again, the impact of technology on connection at work, on individual performance, and on company performance.
When you talk about technology, technology is omnipresent right now in our lives, professional or personal lives. But what has changed so much in the workplace as far as technology is concerned?
Well, technology's changed many aspects of how we work. I would say, number one, people are able to work more remotely these days, which there's positives to that, but there's also challenges of keeping people connected to a culture and a company when they're not in the office all the time. Technology enables people, again, I talk about it in one of the chapters in the book called Finding the Sweet Spot Between Tech and Connect, leveraging technology for all of its greatness. I mean, right now, actually, I'm in New York City. Where are you? I don't even know where you are.
Indianapolis.
So, Indianapolis, right. So technology is enabling us to chat, but if this is all people did was to connect this way, we would be in trouble. And so the idea is to leverage it to strengthen relationships, but also making sure that you understand where, when, and how to put technology in its place so that you can form deeper relationships with colleagues and with clients and customers, because if you don't, you risk becoming a commodity.
And the challenge with technology is many companies adopt different technologies and different tools or platforms because they have to, but they just stack up a number of those tools or platforms. And usually what they do is they create even more challenges and obstacles for the employees and for the users to go through that technology transformation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great kinds of technology out there, but it's about creating protocols and rules of the road and making sure that everybody knows how to use it and why they're using it and how that is connected to who the company is as a brand and what their values are. So the book is not, and I'm not anti-technology in any way, but let's just be smarter about how we use it and why we're using it.
All right, so you published that book, Bring Your Human at Work, 10 surefire ways to design a workplace that is good for people, great for business, and just might change the world. And you cover some very interesting topics in this book. So let's pick some of them and let's get your perspective on each of them. And the first one is encouraging employees to be healthy in body and spirit.
Mm-hmm. So when I was writing the book, I came up with a number of different ways to bring your human to work. Or another way to look at that is there are 10 different ways to curate connection, because this may sound cheesy, but left to our own devices, excusing the pun, we're not connecting. And so when we think about the chapters in the book and all the different ways to do that, there are companies that like to do it through health and wellness. There are companies that like to do it through professional development, companies that like to do it through volunteering and giving back. There's a lot of different ways to think about wellness. This is much more than giving every employee a Fitbit, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. But, the companies that are really looking at health and wellness are saying, we need to look at physical health. We need to look at mental health in terms of why, how to create a workplace that is sustainable to us as humans. And what I was looking at in this, why is this even a thing at work? I mean, why aren't we focused on this in our, just in our personal lives? And my theory behind it is that, pre-technology, back in the day, you have the farmers, they stopped working when the sun went down. And even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when our work day ended, we went home, and that's when we connected with ourselves, with family, with friends. And because now the technology is blurring those lines between work and home, my sense in interviewing hundreds of people on this topic is that there is a desire to ensure that you can bring pieces of you to work, because pieces of work follow you home every day, and there just are not those separations anymore. And so that's why companies are feeling that they need to begin to address these things at work.
Now, you were talking about wellness earlier, and what is interesting is many companies see wellness as a way to get some, discounts on insurance premiums, but they don't look at the whole employee well-being, or the whole wellness, whether it's spiritual, physical. What are you seeing? What trends are you seeing in the companies that you work with or you advise to?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's nothing bad about lowering insurance premiums, and there's a lot of companies that says that truly works, and so I think that is a piece of it. Where I have been focused is more around things like, let's ensure that our employees can disconnect at the end of the day. I in this chapter, because this is so new and there aren't that many companies looking at this in a holistic way, or at least that I've been able to find yet. Companies will do piece of it. I wrote this chapter a little bit differently than I did the others. I did much more of a deep dive into a specific company called Dynamic, which is a healthcare consulting firm that was very interested and focused on all these different aspects of wellness. So at Dynamic, and one of the reasons why I thought it was such an interesting case study was that, it's a consulting firm, which is an industry that's not typically such a humane industry. You're usually on the road a lot and at the beck and call of all your clients. But Dan Calista is the founder. He wanted to create the healthiest company in the world. So they have a curator of healthy snacks, and they look at, the ways in which, light and the chairs that you're sitting in affect your body. They have a program called Z-Mail, as in catch some Z's, and which is basically a rule of the road that says you can't send an email after 10 p.m. or before 6 a.m. unless it's mission critical. And so it's just creating awareness that these things impact people, and that working 24/7 is not good for our health, mentally or physically. The last thing I would say on this is that, the Surgeon General last year came out with a study that found that the biggest health risk facing our country is not smoking or secondhand smoke, it's loneliness and isolation. And we are spending many, many of our days, weeks, months, hours at work. We need to think about how we connect with people during the day, because it does have an impact on our health.
The second topic is running your meetings with clear purpose.
Yeah. So we spend a huge, time and sitting in meetings. And many of them are just because, people will say to me, I don't know, I've always had an 11 a.m. meeting on Wednesdays, kind of because of inertia. And so when you think about meetings, and meetings are an amazing way to create connections with people. And so I do think that they're important. But when I think about meetings, I break it down into three parts, purpose, presence, and protocol. So the first is, what's the reason behind having this meeting? And one of the co-founders of Warby Parker does something where at the end of every week, he does a bit of a post-mortem on all of his meetings, and to make sure, was it productive? Did it make sense that the right people were there? All of that. And if it's not, then the next week he'll not have that meeting, and really strategically looking at how a certain meeting fits into his goals and objectives for the week. So my guess is if everybody did a postmortem on all their meetings, they probably would be able to get rid of 20% of their meetings. That's just my guess, maybe even more, because there's so many that don't have a purpose. So the second part is presence, and we all know that physical presence and mental and emotional or psychological presence are two very different things. So if you do have a meeting and you do decide it's an important part, of your day and it's aligned with your goals, make sure that you're actually there. Put away the technology, connect with your colleagues, get the benefits of that human connection, because being truly present at a meeting correlates with higher levels of productivity and innovation. And then finally, creating protocols. These meetings are, back to left to our own devices, we're not connecting. I mean, we're all very tempted to be multitasking our way through most meetings and conference calls. But as leaders, we should think about creating these organizational protocols. And, that keeps everybody on track, and it is just much, much better, and people end up enjoying the meetings and getting a lot more out of them.
Yeah, and there's a lot of confusion or misconception about, being busy versus being productive, right? Spending time in meetings doesn't
100%.
mean that you're being productive.
No, and it usually is inversely correlated.
Right, and I'll always...
a lot of meetings, you're not being productive at all, and that's why you're texting under the table trying to get your quote-unquote work done, which lowers productivity and can really hurt relationships.
Oh, yeah. And always make the pun of boardroom meeting, not B-O-A-R-D, but B-O-R-E-D.
Yes, exactly.
It's interesting because I had a few months ago, I had a Chris Byers. He's the CEO of a company called Formstack. 80% of his workforce is completely remote. And one of his protocols that he put in place is that everybody has to have their camera on so that everybody can see each other. Camera cannot be turned off. So that there's even a sense of, accountability just to make sure that at least you feel engaged. You have to be engaged no matter what, but at least you look engaged because everybody is watching you.
I would say, I am a huge, huge fan of that. And it doesn't always make me the most popular person when I'm talking to companies. The manager's okay with it, but because we want to sit in our office and multitask. I have a woman from Herman Miller that shared with me that her team is remote, and at her team every meeting. But in her team meeting on Mondays, she says to her team, look, I don't care where in the world you are. I don't care what you're wearing, as long as it's appropriate. But turn the camera on. We need to remember as a team, at least once a week, that there is a person behind this device. And it really does make a huge difference. It's not rocket science. It doesn't cost anything. And to me, and from the people with whom I've spoken, there is a big return on that investment.
I agree. So easy transition to topic number 3, which is making space for face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, so the chapter is called Space Matters, and it really does. It really does matter. I am not saying in the book that, again, you have to be a company like Google or Facebook and spend millions and millions of dollars on space, but the idea is to be intentional and think about where people sit and how those spontaneous collisions take place, whether it's, putting a, nice cappuccino maker in the middle of the office so people bump into each other, those kinds of things. So I do think that the physical space matters. I do think that with the increasing number of companies that have gone to an open office space, it's even more important to ensure that you have places where people can go to do the deep thinking, the deep dive work, and not have to spend their whole day with headphones on. I see that is, causing a fair amount of stress with employees when they feel like they can't think straight. I also include some examples in the book of companies that sort of, they switch it up. Every 6 months at DoSomething.org, they have something called The Reaping, which is based on a term from Game of Thrones, which I have not yet seen. But they, every 6 months, have something where everybody switches seats. They all come in when it's the day of the reaping. They pull a number out of a hat. If they're number 1, they get to pick their seat first, and then it goes from there. And it just gives people a different perspective. And there's a lot of research around the people that you're sitting closest to or the people that you interact with. So as companies scale and become more siloed, why not use space as another lever that you can pull to create those important organizational connections?
Right, and even though it's pretty common now in technology companies to have more project teams than people working on individual tasks, more and more companies beyond the tech industries are adopting that project-based work where there's a sense of collaboration and getting people across functions work together on a specific project. So there's a bit more human interaction and human collaboration, and they mix it up as they move from one project to another. So they don't necessarily work with the same people over and over and over again, which reinforces that idea of face-to-face and human interaction and collaboration.
Yeah, this goes, to your point, far beyond just the technology industry. All companies are dealing with it.
The next topic is building professional developments into the company culture.
Yeah, so when we think about what employees want today, the top three things, the first is they want to work for an organization where they're connected to a sense of purpose and meaning. The second is they want flexibility in how they work, which is leading to this increased amount of people working remotely, part-time, full-time, the gig economy, all of that. And the third thing that they want, and it's so important to people today, is they want to grow on the job. And I talk about the importance of helping your employees grow on and sideways, because, gone are the days where there's 50 rungs in the ladder and every year you get a little bit of a promotion, you get a new title and a little bit more money. It's just not the way organizations are structured anymore. And so companies need to be creative and talk to people about how they want to develop. And this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. This isn't getting a course and having everybody in your company go through it. That also won't cut it in 2019 and beyond. That it's a different landscape at work, and it's a very tight job market. So what do human companies do? They talk to their employees about how they want to develop. They'll say to people, I know that you need these kinds of technical skills to do this job, but how else do you want to develop? Do you want to become a better public speaker? Do you want to have a bilingual? Sometimes people will say, hey, you know what, I really want to take an improv class, and maybe that will help me become a better speaker. So more and more companies are helping people develop in ways that may not be immediately related, directly related to their current job, but are looking farther out and looking at it as a retention tool.
It's interesting because there's still a reluctance from some organizations to really invest in professional developments, knowing that now the tenure within the company is pretty short. It's might be just a couple of years, 3 years. So they're asking themselves, why should we invest in developing our people, knowing that they will likely leave in the next 2 years or 3 years?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. There was a study that I saw in the New York Times a couple of months ago. They were talking about the MOOCs, the massive online courses, and it was saying that a lot of companies felt like they didn't want to pay for their employees to take them because they felt that they would actually take those skills and use them somewhere else. When in fact, the opposite was true, that they actually took those skills and stayed with the company longer and applied them there. So my feeling is, you're at risk for people leaving anyway. And my belief is that if people know that you're interested in helping them grow, they are much more likely to stay. And for somebody that you've trained that works for you, has worked for you for 12 months, 18 months, if you can get another year out of that employee, that leads to huge bottom line implications. I'm not saying that this is going to get you 10 more years, but sometimes that year or two makes a huge difference.
The next topic is inspiring your workforce to give back to the community.
Yes. So again, going back to what employees want in 2019 and beyond, they want to connect with companies that care about broader issues and where there's purpose and meaning at work. And what I highlight in this chapter is that this is not a one-size-fits-all approach to giving back. Not every company is, I love Tom's and Warby Parker and their strategy of buying one and giving one, but that doesn't have to be the strategy that works for everyone. So there are some companies that I profile in the book that like to focus on giving back to organizations in their immediate geographic community. JetBlue is in this chapter where I talk about, they have 22,000 employees. And so they let people volunteer and give back in the way that's most meaningful for them. And then for every 50 hours of volunteer work they do, they get to give 2 round-trip airline tickets to a charity of their choice. Other companies like to have a day of giving where it's bringing people together and getting that benefit of curating connection with their employees while also giving back. So where I come out on this is that human companies do it, but there's a lot of different ways that you can do it that will benefit your employees and your company.
The last topic is simply saying thank you, which is a basic concept that for whatever reason is very hard to implement. What do you mean by that?
Saying thank you is there's a lot of studies around the impact of gratitude on how people connect, how they feel connected to a company. And, saying thank you is, helps both people feel good, the person doing the thanking and the person being thanked. So to me, this is something that's not rocket science. It's something that is accessible to all of us in terms of our ability to do it. And it's just something that needs to be built into the culture of the organization from the top down.
Where do you see companies with winning cultures moving forward in the next 2 to 3 years?
Right. I would say 2 things come to mind to that question. The first is, people will say to me, do you need to do all 10 things in the book? Which are the most important? My response is, all 10. You can pick and choose from a menu of options, as many as that we've talked about on the podcast today, except for chapter 1. And if you're looking for a place to start, and if you're looking to see how this is going to come to play for your organization in the next few years, you've got to focus on chapter 1, which is first for a reason. And it's called Be Real, How to Speak in a Human Voice. And it's about knowing your values, making sure you don't have 10, 12, or 14 values, which become very difficult to drive any kind of behavior when you have that many. So it's knowing your values. It's speaking in that authentic voice, whether you're communicating via technology or face-to-face, and having that alignment across all mediums of communication. And the third piece is empowering your employees to live those values, when the boss isn't there. So that's a really important place to start, and it's one of the things that I don't see going away anytime soon. The second part of your question looked at technology and AI, and I do often hear people worried about that their jobs are going to go away, and what does that mean? I will say that even today, not even looking out 5 years, technology is taking over different parts of every single job, even now. The more of the routine parts of the job are much better being handled by technology. But what that leaves, it leaves these human skills. It leaves the skills around connecting, around negotiating, around building relationships. And so what I'm seeing, whether I'm speaking to financial advisors or wealth advisors or travel agents, all different kinds of people as I'm traveling around the country talking about this topic, is that it's those skills right now that are almost differentiating performance, whether I'm going to go with company A or company B. And so it's a time where we need to make sure that our employees have these human skills, and that if they don't, that we're training them to ensure that they do have them. Because as technology takes over pieces of jobs, it's these human skills that are left.
And those are differentiator, as you said. Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, in many cases, look, I talk to very high-level attorneys, and there's a lot. I live in New York City. There's a lot of great law firms out there, but there's great law firms in each area of practice, and they charge the same fees, and they're all very well qualified. But what's going to make me go with one firm versus another? It's my relationship with those attorneys. And, it behooves them to make sure that they're spending time to connect with me as a potential client, on a human level.
Before we wrap up our conversation today, let me ask you some fun questions, and then I'll ask you a last word of advice or wisdom. If you were to invite a historical figure to dinner, who would you choose and why?
Oh, I would probably choose about Rosie the Riveter. She's someone that represented, women who worked in factories during World War II and really became an icon and a symbol of feminism. And that's who I would pick.
What profession, other than your own, would you like to attempt?
I like being a college professor.
You would teach which discipline?
Yeah, I would teach. I would bring your human to work to a business school, organizational behavior, so that it becomes required reading for all college students and graduate students. When they get to the workplace, they're going to need to know how to use these skills and bring their human to work.
I like it. What noise or sounds do you love?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I would say my son plays piano, so I love to walk in and hearing him play piano. He's been playing that song "Shallows" that was in one of the Oscar movies, "Star Is Born." So
yeah.
I've been enjoying that lately.
What sound or noise do you hate?
I hate people that have their earbuds in, like on a conference call, on the top of their lungs in a quiet and public place. I don't need to hear what's going on your conference call when I'm not in it.
That's a good one. What is the essential item that you always take with you when you go on vacation?
The book.
Paper book?
Oh, yeah. I like to hold the book, touch the book, and even if it's a little heavy, I always try to bring the book.
What type of books or what type of writing?
I switch off between reading the latest, business nonfiction books that are in my field to just diving into a really great fiction book. So I try to alternate.
All right. What's the way for our listeners to follow you on social media?
Sure. So my Instagram and my Twitter are just both my name, Erica Keswin. My website is www.ericakeswin.com, ERICAES as in Sam, WIN. Reach out, say hello. I do a monthly newsletter. I won't bombard you if you want to subscribe, where I highlight leaders who get it. So leaders who bring their human to work, and there's many new ones that I've been having interviews with that aren't in the book, so you can learn about those as well.
Any last word of advice or wisdom for our listeners?
I would say, honor relationships. That's really the theme of the book. Honor relationships with your colleagues, with your boss, with the people that work for you, with your clients, and also with yourself. And do your best to find that sweet spot between tech and connect, and yourself up when, if you don't have a great day, because the technology is designed to suck us in. So there's always tomorrow in terms of trying to find that sweet spot.
Wonderful. Great way to end our conversation today. Thank you so much, Erica, for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit our website at expodcast.com. If you want to find out more about our next conferences, go to exsummit.com. Finally, you can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co. See you next week.